of nurturing and grooming fellow change agents to make Nigeria a better place.
As a matter of fact, I tell my colleagues that what
development comes by a critical mass of citizens undertaking the
Until we change the way our system is, until we have that shit from the
Nigeria has a population of 170 million people approximately. I'm told to talk about Nigeria's capitalism, and I've simplified it. I want to look at precepts, problems, and prospects of Nigeria's capitalism. Let me first of all mention something that when we say that Nigeria is 100 years old, it is correct. At the same time, it is fallacious. Because Nigeria is not a nation yet. Okay? Nigeria is a multinational state. Okay? And that is why Obafemi said in 1947 that Nigeria is a mere geographical expression. And that is still very true to today, 1914 to 2014. So we have to bear it at the back of our mind that Nigeria is a product of an amalgamation of multiple nations 100 years ago. I will not do alliteration like the MC was doing the other time. So colloquially, however, Nigeria is a nation, even though practically Nigeria is a country, not a nation. And I said something, I said the more things change, the more they remain the same. And that has been captured in the background speech, given by Pastor Degbe. Can I call you Mr. Honorable or Pastor? Anyone. Mr. Degbe was talking about, how things have moved from, historically, from independence to date. So either we talk about military or civilian, presidential, parliamentary, we've tried all. And the more things change, the more they remain the same, even till now. So Nigeria's political economy, we have to know, Nigeria is still not yet developed, because as Viola mentioned, Nigeria is still a developing country, even though we are trying to become a developed country by 2020, which of course realistically is not possible. But we can go somewhere close to being a developed country if we have visionary leadership. Now, when we talk about capitalism, we have to know the history of capitalism as a social formation that began to replace feudalism in Europe, particularly Western Europe, France, Britain, between 1400 and 1800 as an economic system. And that followed Industrial Revolution, which started in Western Europe. And of course, we know that today, capitalism is the dominant social formation, from America to Britain to France to Germany. Most of the countries that we call developed countries are capitalist countries. Most of them, if not all of them. Of course, with the exception of China, which is now, of course, now becoming a capitalist country in terms of international trade with America and other countries. Now, capitalism in Nigeria has a leg. You know why it has a leg? Because it is extractive. It is extractive in the sense that it promotes rent-seeking politicking. Pastor Otegbe was talking about politics of money. Everybody wants to get there and just get money. Nobody wants to think in terms of how do you even make the money you want to get. Okay? So it is extractive. That is why it is different from the kind of capitalism you have in UK or US. An extractive economy is the opposite of a productive economy. So an extractive economy cannot lead to development, no matter how hard you try. So when you look at the history of capitalism in Nigeria from Royal Niger Company, some of us who did history and government and etc. will probably be familiar with it. Till Shell and Chevron and some other multinational corporations, investment and divestment, wherever, capitalism in Nigeria has always been extractive in nature. Even during the colonial era, they've always taken our resources to develop Europe. Capitalism and mercantilism. Now, this sounds somehow big, but I will simplify. What do we mean by mercantilism? I'm talking about mercantilism because mercantilism is a critical part of capitalism. And it makes a difference why developed countries like America use capitalism to develop their countries, and why underdeveloped countries or least developed countries like Nigeria, in Asia, in Africa, have not been able to tap into the developmental potentials of capitalism. Now, mercantilism is a system of commerce with the sole interest of promoting local production and maintaining a positive balance of trade. If you look at US and UK and other capitalist countries that we see as the ideal countries, they are mercantilist countries. And one of the points I'm going to make today is that instead of focusing on, in Nigeria we have corruption, people have talked about that. Instead of talking about what we can call bourgeoisie, some of us are familiar with that word, bourgeoisie, mercantilism, we should promote economic nationalism. And that is going to be one of the basic recommendations today. That when we have economic nationalists, you will not just have national economists, like Dr. Kunje-Wiala and others. With all due respect, she's very brilliant and intelligent. But when you look at them, it's that their policies favor even the IMF, World Bank, Bretton Woods institution, rather than favoring the ordinary Nigerian people. When I talk about deregulation, commercialization, fuel subsidy removal, etc., the common man suffers for it. So unfortunate. So I'm not going to waste much time on that. Next slide. Now, politics behind the economy. When we talk about economy, economy does not, exist on its own. There's what is called political economy. When you understand economy from political economy perspective, you'll be able to understand that it is not just about politics, it is not just about economy, it's about political economy. And if you don't get your politics right, like Mr. Togbeye said, you cannot get the economy right. And these things are interwoven because they are institutional. Like Mr. Hudo said, family, religion, politics, economy, they are interwoven, including education that has been wonderfully talked about by Viola. So we have to look at this. In 1970, let's just go back to 1970, Nigeria under General Gowon adopted what they call the National Goals of Development. Number one goal is that Nigeria is going to be a united, strong, and self-reliant nation. Have we been able to do that? Have we been able to do that? Number two goal, a great and dynamic economy. Have we been able to achieve that? No. Number three, a just and egalitarian society. Egalitarian means equalitarian, a society where everybody is equal. Okay? Have we been able to achieve egalitarianism? No. Number four goal, a land of bright and full opportunity for all citizens. Has that been possible? No. And number five goal, a free and democratic society. Maybe to some extent. A free and democratic society, because under Abacha, we cannot talk like this, But even our democratic development has a leg. Because people cannot still, vie for office without having money bags. Without godfathers. So we still don't have a free and democratic society. So I'm arguing that even under Babangida, when we have SAP, Structural Adjustment Program, under Abacha, we had Vision 2010. Under Obasanjo, we have NEEDS, National Economic Empowerment Development Strategy, NEEDS. Under Yaradua, we have Vision 2020. Under the present president, Dr. Jonathan, we have transformation agenda. All have not been able to work towards the developmental potential of our country. That means that capitalism, which is embedded in all these policies, have failed us. IMF imposed SAP on us through Babangida through the back door. And IMF represents a capitalist institution at the international level. So that means that capitalism has failed Nigeria because all these programs have failed Nigeria. Now, why? Why is that? Let's look at it. We have some problems. Number one is that unbridled capitalism is equal to helplessness and joblessness. You cannot have just unbridled capitalism. In America and Britain, they tell us that they practice capitalism. Yes, they practice capitalism, but it is not an unbridled one. If you remember in 2008, during the economic and financial crisis, America bailed out General Motors with billions of dollars. They bailed out several companies. And that is how, in fact, President Obama rode on the back of the economic crisis in the US to become the president. And when he got into power, he spent the state money. Now, why am I talking about that? Is because capitalism means free market economy, which means that there should be a minimal state control of the economy, theoretically speaking. But in practice, capitalist countries don't just leave their companies to survive or to collapse. They bail them out. So unbridled capitalism is what we have been practicing in Nigeria. It can never work in a developing country because it has not even put to use in a developed country. Number two problem is that there is a growing social inequality. The gap between the haves and the have-nots, the upper class and the lower class, is so wide. Pastor Tegbe was talking about people dressing well at the same time being beggars, professional beggars. So it's because as a result of social inequality in the country. And that is one of the, I want to use the big grammar, concomitant. Is that a familiar word? But let me say concomitant. One of the consequences, okay, that's a synonym for concomitant. One of the consequences of unbridled capitalism, there will be hopelessness, and of course there will be crime. The crime rate will be higher. Number 3 problem is that there's the dearth of socially empowering policies. You don't have socially empowering policies, except probably in some states, like maybe Edo, Osun, and some other ones. Most of the states in Nigeria don't implement, they don't even fathom it, socially empowering policies. Recently, very funny, the federal government said they're going to import stoves, cooking stoves from South Africa for rural women at the tune of 9.2 billion naira. That's so, I don't know. I don't want to say that's crazy. But that is so, unfathomable. That is not socially empowering, because when you buy stove for rural women, how are you empowering them? Another problem of capitalism in Nigeria is that of external influence. I mentioned briefly the IMF, World Bank, etc., etc. Now, I'm not anti-IMF because I know that in a global economic system, you need some financial institutions that should probably come to the aid of those who don't have, or probably be like regulators of the international financial system. But when the policies they recommend do not translate to what can empower the people, then it is the responsibility of the leaders of the country involved to reject those policies. You cannot see IMF going to China or Singapore or Malaysia or Hong Kong, and to recommend anti-people policy. They can't do it. They can't simply do it. So the external influence is another thing, because at times the leaders have their hands tied as a result of the imposition from outside. Then the last problem is bourgeois mercantilism. Instead of promoting economic nationalism, mercantilism that will favor local industries, what you have is some kind of mercantilism that will favor just a clique of people. If in telecommunication industry or cement production, or you will know 1 or 2 or 3 people will just dominate. That is what is called bourgeois mercantilism. It cannot develop country, particularly a country like Nigeria. We move on to prospect, because I have to move on very fast. Capitalism, however, is not a bad system of economy, because capitalism is an engine room for industrial development. It has been used to develop Europe. It has been used to develop part of Asia. And of course, it is developing countries like Singapore and China. And people are now talking about those countries emerging from world status to first world status. That is what they're now called Asian tigers. Okay, and people are now saying that if you can extrapolate some of the success stories across Asia into Africa, you are going to have African lions. And maybe Nigeria will be one of the African lions. So capitalism is not a bad thing entirely. It's an engine room for industrial development. We now have auto companies in Nigeria, car assembling companies in Nigeria, in Anambra State, Ogun State, and some other ones. Another good thing about capitalism is that because it preaches free economy, so it promotes innovation and entrepreneurship. Okay? America and other countries that have developed based on capitalism have been the most innovative and most entrepreneurially successful countries across the globe. So capitalism is good. And of course, number 3, capitalism has also increased the economic potentials of Nigeria as a country. Currently, Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa by GDP. Because there's a difference between being a large economy and being a strong economy. In terms of strength, South Africa is still the strongest economy in Africa. In terms of GDP, and when they calculate GDP, they don't look at what the common men or women face. They only look at the financial progress, and maybe telecommunication is booming, oil and gas and all that. So it's only a very clique of the economy, they look to calculate GDP. So being large is different from being strong. However, if capitalism is used to a positive end, it may further increase the strength of Nigerian economy. Okay, so beyond the aggregates of wealth in specific sectors, we should look at how the economy can be better. Now, the Nigerian condition requires fundamental, surgical, operations. However, I'm going to recommend just four solutions. Number one is that we have to diversify our economy. Diversification of the economy. The international capital for monocultural economies, such as an oil-dependent country like Nigeria, cannot be sustainable. It's not even sustainable from the recent experience of Naira devaluation. Just because the oil price falls, then your Naira moves from 156 Naira to 182 Naira per dollar. Just because of the price of oil. And that has not affected other countries that are not just depending on oil. So we have to diversify the economy. Let's go into agriculture, tourism. And if you go to Singapore, they don't have oil. I don't think so. Japan doesn't have oil. Japan does not have oil. And it's one of the most economically viable countries in the world. US just discovered oil. They call it shale oil. There's a new technology where you can get oil from the rock. And because US has discovered that, they've stopped buying oil from many OPEC members, including Nigeria. Until recently, United States used to import 10% of its oil from Nigeria. Now they're not buying even not a single barrel of crude oil from Nigeria. Now, the price is falling and the market is falling. That's cause for concern. Until you diversify the economy, you cannot develop. Whatever kind of system, capitalism, socialism, whatever. Number two is that capitalism without a functional infrastructural base is hardly possible, plausible, or sustainable. In fact, I cannot think about any serious capitalist country that does not have a strong infrastructural base. I've lived in UK for maybe roughly 5 years. 5 years, not a single second, light never went off. Not a single second. Can you fathom that? I know many of us have traveled abroad before. Not a single second for 5 years. Is it possible in Nigeria? It's going to be possible, but not yet. Okay? I've been to South Africa at least twice, and the least I spent in South Africa was a month. 1 month in Cape Town, not a single second. Electricity did not go, was not off. Not a single second. Now, you begin to realize that Nigeria still have a long way to go when you look at the megawatt stories. Okay? South Africa has a population of 50 million people, and you have 45,000 megawatts for 50 million people in South Africa. Nigeria has a population of 170 million people approximately, and you have megawatts 3,500. 3,500 megawatts for 170 million people in Nigeria. Juxtapose that with South Africa, 50 million people, 45,000 megawatts. A long way to go. So we need an infrastructural base in order to even say that capitalism can favor us or can help us to develop. Number 3 recommendation is what I call national mercantilism. If you Google it or you go to any textbook, you may not see it there. But in the process of putting up this presentation, I just think there should be something to be called national mercantilism instead of bourgeois mercantilism that we have in Nigeria. National mercantilism, in my definition, refers to the promotion of local industries for the sustainability of the national economy. Okay, that is national mercantilism. If you have that, you are going to have a capitalism that we can all be proud of. And number 4, effective leadership, disdain for corruption, and promotion of ethical ideals. I've taught public administration at least in 3 universities. And one of the things I always emphasize is that you cannot have public policy, whether at the implementation stage, formulation stage, implementation stage, or evaluation stage, without promoting ethical ideals. Most of the policies that have been formulated in Nigeria lack ethical ideas. They are just chop by chop. Or what was it Viola that said, my turn, your turn, Nigeria enterprises or something. So we need effective leaders, not leaders that will tell us that they will throw up hands and say, Naira can fall from heaven to earth. It is not FG or CBN. Effective leadership is important. You need diversification of economy. You need capitalism with a strong infrastructural base. And of course, you need national mercantilism. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much. So please, let's give him another round of applause.